To support this bill.
Chairman, the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Well, I'd like to thank Dr. Doolittle for that wonderful presentation. That was an incredibly enthusiastic. Morris Williamson almost fell asleep. They're so proud of their program that the best they could do is the man in the bow tie. What a cracker! The spirit and the esprit de corps and the enthusiasm of John Hayes was bar none. John Hayes made a very interesting point, sir. He said that this Prime Minister John Key and the National Party knows what they're doing. Well, I can do no better, sir, than to quote from one of their mates, Rob Cameron, who in respect of SOEs said this, that in respect of he's head of the Capital Markets Development Task Force, a government appointment, presumably a mate of John Key and Dr. Doolittle's and the others over there, he said that he backed the sale of SOEs. He backed the sale of SOEs.
Point of order, Louise Upson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a long-standing rule that members are addressed by the correct name in this House.
Yes, I think the member knows, so apologies accepted. The Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
I was speaking, of course, of John Hayes, in case there was any confusion. For those listening out there, thank you for that to the government. What Rob Cameron said is he backed the sale of SOEs. He said that the management of the scheme has been, quote, a disaster. So that's what Rob Cameron, a mate and an appointee of the national government, said about John Key's management and the government's management of the sale of SOEs, which, as we know, of course, 80% of New Zealanders do not want their assets sold, which they already own. An utter disaster from start to finish. I have never seen an attempted IPO, and I've worked for a number of companies that have been engaged in IPOs, initial public offerings. I have never seen an IPO so botched by an entity in history in this country. Mighty River Power, worst time to sell it, worst economic conditions, worst market conditions, a tribunal hearing hanging over their head. Why? Because of the incompetence of that Prime Minister, because of the incompetence of the Finance Minister and the SOEs Minister and the Treaty Negotiations Minister, aided and abetted by those geniuses in the Maori Party, the weekend warriors, who went around the marae and said, we will fix the Maori ownership issues and property issues. We will fix it. The deal has been done with their paymasters in the National Party, and it was done so well, of course, that the tribunal now is considering the matter, and we know, listening to the iwi Leaders Group, to the Maori Council, that if the government doesn't listen, they'll be off to court. Totally 100% botched. And now we know that the Prime Minister's talked about delaying the sales. I think that's a good thing, colleagues. Anything that delays these sales and gives the people of New Zealand the opportunity, with those of us who are on the right side of this argument in the Parliament, to stop these asset sales is a good thing, and to allow that referendum to get up where people will have a direct say, and then there will be no more talk about mandates from this crew over here. So this, as John Hayes described it, alias Celeste Pat, of course, John Hayes, as he described it, the Prime Minister and the National Government know what they're doing. Well, not in the eyes of 80% of New Zealanders, not in the eyes of Rob Cameron, the botched, mismanaged IPO from start to finish. And then what do we hear today? Well, Solid Energy, another one that's on the block with this crew. Hang on, Solid Energy's books aren't that good. Why? Through I don't vent any fault of their own on that, but there are international ramifications in terms of China with natural resources and the orders they are putting in for things like coal and other natural resources. The books aren't really that good. So the government suddenly decided, well, maybe this mightn't be the best time to sell. Likewise in New Zealand. And if you actually look at the litany of problems some of these SOEs had, Meridian being put over a barrel in respect of negotiations with their biggest customer, Bluff Aluminium Smelter. Now, is this a really good time to get Meridian up and sell it? I would not have thought so, given the leverage that's being put over them by some of their clients. So this from a Prime Minister, to quote John Hayes, the man in the bow tie, in case you missed him, who said the Prime Minister and the National Government know what they're doing. Well, even their own mates say they don't know what they're doing, in respect of SOEs, a disaster. If you look at some of the sort of record of the National Government, they knew what they were doing, they said, in tourism, didn't they? Because the big silver bullet for the economy, where we now have 50,000 more people unemployed, about 80 or 90,000 young people are not in work, not in training, We have the biggest training opportunity in New Zealand's history called the Christchurch earthquake. But how many apprentices have we had in 23 months out of that? Zip. But the big hit was going to be the cycleway. And we had the Minister of Tourism, the Associate Minister, I'm trying to remember the chap from Napier, help me, Mr Tremaine, who came to the Select Committee, and we said, OK, well, if this was going to be the big hit, how many permanent jobs have created? Couldn't name one. How many businesses have been created? He named 2. One, I think, was a fish and chip shop in Napier. So as people sort of got an appetite up as they'd cycled around, they whipped in for the old double meat burger and chips, might have bumped into Jerry. Secondly, was a bicycle shop. Well, you'd naturally think that might pick up the pace if you had a cycle ray running down the side. So the stone cold end of that was 2 businesses. We don't know how many permanent jobs, but 2 businesses are going gangbusters, and I congratulate those 2 solitary businesses somewhere in Napier. The other achievement, of course, is the other big achievement. Remember the financial hub. New Zealand was going to be an international financial hub. Where's that gone? Zip, gone by lunchtime. Then there was mining and national parks. Another U-Butte, Jerry Brownlee, bulldozer, D9 special. Gone, botched, and this from a government, to quote John Hayes, who apparently knows what they're doing. They know what they're doing to the extent that 1,000 Kiwis, talented Kiwis, young and old, are leaving our shores every week for places like Australia. Every week. And these guys, of course, were going to fix all that. They had the ideas, they had the brighter future. Gone. 50,000 Kiwis a year leaving to go to Australia. And John Hayes, the big hitter, the impact player from the National Party, the man they put up when they are really in trouble, I'm told, they put him up to make the case that this is a solid government that has a growth strategy. What is it, a 120-point plan? There's so many plans, so many points, so many reviews. They're running out of ink and Xerox paper in the government departments, and yet we still have their legacy, 50,000 more people unemployed than when they came to office, 50,000 people a year leaving New Zealand. So the 120-point plans, if there is a plan perhaps to get people on the end of the Xerox machine, copying and typing all these plans, then maybe that might be a full employment strategy. But the truth is, as Mr Hayes knows, as he expressed with such enthusiasm, didn't he? He sort of oozed enthusiasm. It sort of dripped from every pore. He was so enthusiastic about his government's program. As he knows, they are off course. And I just say to Mr Hayes, amongst all the hyperbole and all the cliches, out of all the sort of, Crosby text to sprint briefings that he's read, can he give us some facts? Why is it, I say to Mr Hayes, there are 50,000 people more unemployed than when he came to office? Why is it that 50,000 Kiwis a year under his regime are leaving for Australia? Why is it that his government has botched the asset sale? Hang on, we've got Rumpelstiltskin in the corner there, sir, having a go. Give us one example where the IPO of state assets has not been botched. Give us an example where New Zealand people, sir, have got behind this asset sales program. We know they haven't, because 80% of the polls say they're against it. Give us an example where progress is being made. How many apprentices are we getting out of Christchurch? Look at the Christchurch rebuild. Tragic, slow. What's the government's response? We know one of the big blockages down there is insurance. So after 23 months, the big fella, Jerry Brownlee, gets up, jumps up and down, stamps his feet and says to the New Zealand people, I am brassed off with insurance companies. We applaud. We were brassed off 22 months ago. And that was, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago. And what has been the sort of physical or practical action to back up these fine words? Zero. Absolutely nothing. And this government knows what it's doing. Well, the people of Christchurch know what has to be done down there. But the problem is they just can't get any action. And cliches and fine words and ministers being brassed off and stamping their fist occasionally to be followed by zero is not a plan, is not a government in charge, is not a government showing leadership, whether it be in training, whether it be in health. And then we look at some of the myopic things they're getting sucked into. Hiki Parada apparently knew what she was doing over the teacher-staff ratios. What a botch-up. I could use more colourful language, sir, but this is a sacred place. Then we have Mr Banks, whose greatest contribution is to put a bill into Parliament getting rid of 31 acts that don't exist. We won't mention envelopes, we won't mention .com. What an absolute botch-up that has. This from a government, to quote Mr Hayes, that knows what they're doing. ACC, Nick Smith, went troppo, sir, really troppo, checked out in more ways than one. I say to Mr Hayes, show us a government that knows what they're doing, show us a Prime Minister that knows what they're doing, because I'm sure, sir, outside this chamber, the people of New Zealand would love to see one as well.
That's why they voted you out.
Call Eugenia Sage.
Speaker. Mr Speaker, this is a budget which doesn't just